On this week's 51%, we recognize Domestic Violence Awareness Month. WAMC's Samantha Simmons speaks with Equinox counselor Melissa Kovelman about what domestic violence looks like in different types of relationships.
It isn't about sex or gender or anything. It's about who's wielding the power and control.
We also check in with Upper Hudson Planned Parenthood to learn about its new program offering menopause care to underrepresented communities. I'm Jessie King. It's all up next on 51%.
I was standing around like one of those girls I had seen in a movie. The whole world was a movie back then. I had my sunglasses on, I wanted to be seen without seeing shy Lolita. I wasn't really in it, I didn't really get it.
You're listening to 51%, a WAMC production dedicated to women's issues and experiences. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jessie King. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And while we may not want to admit it, domestic violence is actually very common. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says nearly 3 in 10 women and 1 in 10 men have experienced sexual assault, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner. The CDC estimates that comes out to about 24 people a minute. And even outside that, almost half of Americans report experiencing psychological aggression by a partner in their lifetime. But as our main guest today will tell us, domestic violence is not restricted to romantic relationships. It happens between children and parents and other family members as well. Melissa Kovelman is a licensed mental health counselor with Equinox, a nonprofit organization helping survivors of domestic violence and substance abuse in New York's capital region. WAMC's Samantha Simmons spoke with Kovelman about the mission behind Domestic Violence Awareness Month, what domestic violence looks like, how to know the signs, and how to get help. Just a heads up that today's episode may be triggering for some listeners. If you or someone you love is experiencing domestic violence or intimate partner abuse, please know the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 by calling 1-800-799-SAFE or by texting START to 88788.
Domestic Violence Awareness Month takes place in the month of October, and the purpose of it is to raise awareness of domestic violence and understand that it can be a lot more complicated and nuanced than people think it is, that it's not just physical abuse, that there are a lot of other aspects that survivors can experience, and we're trying to bring awareness to that. But also bringing awareness to the resources that we have out there, such as shelter, advocacy within the court system, within the family court system, individual counseling and group counseling. We have several housing programs for clients that may be experiencing homelessness due to domestic violence. So for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we kind of do things like this, where we get out in the community and we talk about what the signs are, how you can, because prevention is key, understanding what it is, what the red flags are, what it looks like if you're trying to gain support, and people can, maybe minimize your problems or, say, why don't you just leave? And so we clear up a lot of those misconceptions about domestic violence and why survivors don't just leave, or why they may miss some of these red flags. And we just go out in the community to health fairs, colleges, and we just let people know what we're doing and, what our mission is, and how they can help us and how they can reach us if they do need us.
And you touched a little bit on it, but what is considered domestic violence? Like you said, there's technicalities to it that people don't understand.
Well, I think a lot of the time people assume that domestic violence is just violence, that if there is, physical violence between two people who are in a relationship, that's domestic violence. That is a piece of it, but there are a lot of types of domestic abuse that when they're not physical, victims can tend to minimize them or not realize that they're abusive because the red flags can often kind of be a little ambiguous, where they may appear to be something else. So what you really want to look for is domestic violence is essentially a pattern of power and control that is exhibited over time. And it generally always escalates. So what it is it's one partner or one person using tactics, verbal abuse, physical abuse, spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, towards the victim or their partner or their parent, and they're using that as a way to control them. So really what it is that the abuser's using power and control as a way to make the victim's world smaller, to decrease their access to support and agency, things like that. So that's what you really want to look for, is that pattern of power and control. One person has more power than the other. One person is maybe possibly fearful of the other. It's going to be an uneven relationship where one person is making all of the decisions and the other one is just trying to really make the right decisions to try to manage the violence or the abuse. But that often, doesn't help, because the abuse has nothing to do with what they're doing. It's just that the abuser doesn't know how to have a healthy relationship, and they only can love and be in a relationship exerting that power and control. And when the victim tries to pull back, often the abuser will escalate their tactics.
You said it's not just a partner, it can be a child to their parent. What does that look like in families? What is that dynamic?
The dynamic of a child that is abusive of their parent, often there's either a caregiving relationship that may be present where the parent is, the child is the caregiver of the parent, and maybe through aspects of that caregiving is using tactics of abuse, like not giving medication, not allowing the parent to have access to adaptive devices, not helping them to do their activities of daily living, financially abusing them by, sometimes we see caregivers or children of elderly clients, they're, taking over their payee status of their pension or their Social Security. So it's a little different because, as I always say, you can get rid of your partner, but you can't divorce your kid.
And can it go the other way? Can a parent be abusive to their child in a way that's different than child abuse?
Absolutely. There are ways where parents, I call it hobbling. They don't realize that they're being abusive or exerting power and control over their children, but not allowing them to have choices, kind of teaching their child this learned helplessness where, they say, you can't do this or you can't do that. They're limiting them by using emotional abuse or by, not when a child wants to do something, go to college or something like that. And, they're trying to reach goals. Parents can very quickly, use parenting as a way to control the child, as to kind of soothe their own emotions instead of doing what's best for the child. I always say that attachment is, it's good to be attached to your parent, but too much of anything is a bad thing. So, these parents, by, not allowing a child to make their own choices or, just being too emotionally enmeshed with the child, that really, even though it looks like love, can be very limiting and isolating for a kid that has a parent that, isn't willing to let them make their own choices or, have any sort of emotional or physical autonomy.
And you mentioned that you guys go to college campuses and kind of probably inform students about domestic violence and other situations they can find themselves in. Kids that are in college, this is probably the first time they're on their own. They can make decisions for themselves. What do you hear from college students that maybe are looking to you for help?
A lot of the time what I do hear is I'm on campus and the person that that I'm reporting has abused me, is still on campus and I'm scared. So those types of things where you're really feeling like the victim is not getting the support that they need at the college, or, as much as we want, everybody has rights, but, it feels like the safety often of victims is being compromised. And then also you see a lot of confusion in terms of, is this really abuse? Because so often things that are red flags, if you look at the other side of them, clients all the time are saying, well, they're texting me, 100 times a day. And, and sometimes they'll say, well, it looks like they're in love with me and we're so excited about being in love. But if you probe further, it's kind of like, oh, well, that's a lot of times in a day. What is the content of those texts, right? And so instead of, being flattered that, this new partner that's so in love with them, when you kind of start digging into it, you realize that, the volume of them is a little overwhelming. And then you're seeing that, maybe things like that, even though you don't realize it, they can become isolating because the partner is constantly, texting and checking in. And those can be really confusing because they're like, well, they really just like me, right? Well, you got to look at that and say, are they respecting your boundaries? No. Have you ever asked them to stop texting you that much and they still do? Well, that's a red flag right there. So it's really looking at it and understanding like that it's not always what it looks like. Sometimes it can look like, this love bombing, can look like it's just this person that's really excited about you, but you really have to look at the content of, what they're sending you or what the questions that they're asking you or the boundaries that they're not respecting. And then you can really see a clearer picture that, oh, this isn't really as healthy as it looks like it could be. Just because someone is sending me flowers or, telling me that I'm wonderful doesn't mean, that it's 100% healthy.
I like that you said it looks like love. It's kind of like a love bombing thing.
Yeah.
And then they, don't treat you as any human should be treated.
Right. And that's what often happens is clients will say, well, in the beginning, it was like really wonderful. It was like a fairy tale, and I'm like, well, that's nice. But what it is it really kind of it puts these rose-colored glasses on over your eyes, and it causes you to sometimes really not look at things for what they are. We may minimize the negative behaviors, or we may look at the negative behavior. And again, we think like, oh, well, he's concerned, they don't want me to talk to this friend because they think that she's, doesn't like us and wants us to break up. And maybe you don't look at that the first time as isolation. You don't, you think that's maybe my partner being concerned about me and thinking they want the best for me. When your partner is crossing your boundaries or saying something that makes you feel uncomfortable, what happens when you express that, right? And that's kind of where you can start to see that the abusive tactics of a partner can start to come out, because when you're agreeing, they're like, okay. But the first time that you try to take a little bit of that power and control back, they're really kind of not knowing what to do. It's like a car with its tires on the ice and they're just spinning their wheels, trying all kinds of new things to gain that control back. And that's often, where somebody realizes this is not a loving relationship. There's something that doesn't feel good here. But often when people go to get support, they get told, just leave. Or how come you didn't see that? Or, oh, that's not a big deal. And they already are confused because this is a person that is maybe saying that they love them and also alongside being nice to them. So it's the cognitive dissonance there of they love me and they're being nice to me and say that they love me, but then there are things that they do that don't feel good, right? Like, so that's hard to understand for some people. And if you don't have support that can say, yeah, that's not supposed to happen, what can we do about that? Then it's really difficult to understand what's going on.
Is there a way to spot it maybe before you get in a relationship or before you decide that your child is going to be the one who has the control over your care? And I guess why don't people just leave too?
I mean, number one is that leaving is the most dangerous time. As I had stated previously, domestic violence, it always escalates in some way. And not necessarily to the point where, it always becomes violent, but it's just when an abuser is not getting what they've always got from the tactics that they've used before, they will employ different ones. So often people think leaving is just going to make the situation change or end. Unfortunately, again, when we say leaving is the most dangerous time, that's because it opens you up to a whole new host of risks, which we call post-separation risks, which means that after you leave, often abusers, they kick up their stuff. So they might start stalking you, especially with, kids that may be abusing their parents or parents that are abusing their adult children. You're trapped because you don't know where you can actually go, right? Like you have to think of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the most important thing, on the bottom of your foundation is safety and security and shelter. And if you don't have safety, security, and shelter, it can be really hard to see what your next step is, and understand that if you're setting boundaries and somebody's not respecting them or encroaching upon them, and you're having a conversation about that, that there's something that might be going on there where somebody's not respecting your boundaries, and you might just kind of have to look and say, all right, how do we handle this? When people think that leaving is going to solve everything, and it doesn't, that's when they often return, because it's like, this is too hard. I can't do this on my own financially, or I can't do this on my own emotionally. People within these relationships, whether their abuser is a parent or a child or an intimate partner, the emotional and verbal abuse tends to really ruin their self-esteem and make them, their self-concept becomes dependent upon what other people think of them or how other people are, pleased with them. And unfortunately, that's not a really reliable source of self-esteem, right? So it's not about, again, when you leave, it's not automatically going to make everything better.
How can people outside of these relationships spot this?
I think, it's most important to, if you're to gently, approach it and say, this is just something that I've noticed in a, gentle, non-judgmental manner. But the most important thing is just listening. Often I say with clients, like, they don't have to engage in services the day that they find out what we offer at Equinox. Planting the seed for them to understand that maybe this is something that's going on. And these are resources that I have that are in the community that are free, that I can access when I'm ready. Equinox, each county has a domestic violence organization that is paid for by the state. So we have free counseling, free advocacy, shelter. Here's the hotline number. Do with it what you will. Sometimes just knowing that there's a place to go when you're finally ready.
And I guess a lot of times we think about domestic violence situations, a man abusing a woman, but it goes the other way.
Absolutely. And that's a hard thing for a lot of men, because, they can be seen, again, as they're supposed to be seen as the stronger sex. Well, that's actually not true, because there are a lot of men that grew up with the idea of never hitting a woman. And unfortunately, there are a lot of women who are really, they don't honor that. They use physical abuse as a way to control their partner, because they understand that the partner, no matter what, they won't do that, right? That's not a choice for them. So again, they're making choices to control their relationship, using something to intimidate their partner. It's the same thing, as even though if a man is physically stronger, it's the same thing, and it can be very hard, because when they go to seek help, there are providers out there that will really minimize the problem or say that you're not a victim. I've had clients in rural areas where police have really just told them, laughed at them and said, what's your problem? Get a hold of your wife and control her. And that's really insulting, because again, it's making the man responsible for her abusing him. And he's sitting there saying, what did I do? And right there, it's like, you're missing the whole point. It isn't about sex or gender or anything. It's about who's yielding the power and control, whose world got smaller, right? Who's feeling the fear.
That was Melissa Kovelman, a licensed mental health counselor with Equinox, speaking with WAMC's Samantha Simmons. Equinox offers support to survivors of domestic violence and those struggling with substance abuse throughout New York's capital region. You can learn more at equinoxinc.org. And again, if you or someone you love is experiencing domestic violence or intimate partner abuse, please know the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 by calling 1-800-799-SAFE or texting START to 88788. Again, call 1-800-799-SAFE or text START to 88788. We're going to switch gears before we go. Planned Parenthood is often lauded or targeted for its abortion care services, depending on where you land on the subject. But it does so much more than that. It offers STD testing, including HIV testing, birth control, breast exams, mental health counseling, gender-affirming care, and in some locations, menopause care. Menopause, when a woman stops getting her period, is a natural phase of life that kicks off usually in your late 40s or early 50s, and it marks a complete shift for the body with both physical and mental symptoms. A lot of people, though, can feel like they're sort of riding that roller coaster on their own, and that's not how you have to go through it. Upper Hudson Planned Parenthood in New York's Capital Region says it is launching menopause services at its 3 locations in Albany, Hudson, and Troy this fall, with a special focus on serving transgender individuals and women of color. I spoke with Bree Sampson, Director of Clinical Services at UHPP, to learn more about what menopause care entails.
Clinically, we sort of separate it into perimenopause and postmenopause. And I think postmenopause is what most people talk about when they just say menopause, because that is the time where you have not had a period for a full year. And it's not because you're pregnant, and it's not because you're on birth control, and it's not because of any other medical reason. It's because your period stopped, because you're postmenopausal. And then perimenopause is that transition period. And that is usually what starts. Again, typically it's like mid 40s, can start early 40s. Usually menopause or postmenopause starts at around 51, 52. But again, it totally varies person to person. But the perimenopause stage, when the body is starting to produce less estrogen, periods are getting more irregular before they disappear. That is the time where people tend to be the most symptomatic and therefore the most uncomfortable. And so when we talk about treatment, primarily, we're talking about the symptoms of perimenopause. Perimenopause, postmenopause, menopause as a process is not in itself like dangerous or anything. You don't need treatment for menopause, but we do know that perimenopause can be super uncomfortable. And so the treatments, quote unquote, are targeted at trying to help people with the symptoms that they're having to help them live their lives more comfortably and more fully.
So let's get into some of those symptoms of perimenopause then.
The most common symptoms are the ones that you probably hear most about are things like hot flashes and night sweats are 2 things that are super common and can be very uncomfortable. But other things that also are associated with menopause are things like irregular bleeding that's really annoying, sleep disturbances, mood changes, brain fog, all those different things can also be associated with the change in the hormones. And so those are things as well that we can help people to address.
When it comes to treatment, what kinds of treatments are there? Is it mostly hormone therapy, or are there other options?
Mostly is an interesting word. I would say that of the patients that we are seeing for this service, most do end up on hormonal therapy. And the reason for that is because the data shows tend to be really, really effective. There are also many non-hormonal options for people who either can't have hormones or don't want to use hormones. There are definitely other avenues that we can take. A lot of SSRIs and SNRIs, which are medication classes that are primarily used for anxiety and depression. Those also can be effective at helping with what we call the vasomotor symptoms. So again, that's your hot flashes, your night sweats, can be helpful with those. There also are other medications like gabapentin or pregabalin that have been shown to be effective. We talk to patients a little bit as well about over-the-counter supplements, things like soy isoflavones and things like that. I will be honest, supplements and things tend to be less effective. And also we have generally less data on the safety and efficacy of them, but they're something that can be more readily available, don't need a prescription. Some people feel more comfortable because they feel more natural. And so it's something that we like to sort of keep in our toolbox as something we can offer patients education about.
So your body's going through some pretty major changes at this time. Once you're done with perimenopause, once you've kind of gotten through that stage and now you're postmenopausal, what are the outcomes of some of those changes?
The main difference is the body's production of hormones. So I've heard menopause once described as sort of puberty in reverse. And I kind of liked that analogy because when you are in puberty, it is your body starting to create more testosterone or more estrogen, depending upon what kind of gonads you have, that cause those changes that can lead to your ability to be able to reproduce. And then menopause is the opposite. It's the body making less of those hormones. So you stop making testosterone, you stop making estrogen, and it's the lack of estrogen specifically that causes most of the symptoms. So the lack of estrogen is what can make periods or bleeding get really irregular, lighter, heavier, abnormal before they go away. Lack of estrogen also can impact your body's ability to regulate temperature. So that's why the hot flashes and the night sweats can be so severe. Someone who has less estrogen, their like comfort zone for their body's internal temperature gets a lot smaller. And so you're going to start to like sweat and feel really warm at an internal body temperature that you used to be able to tolerate. And then the other symptoms, again, like the brain fog and the mood changes also can be associated to the change in the hormones as well. Another thing is that estrogen and testosterone are really important in maintaining your bone health. So that's why if you hear in people who are older, perimenopause, postmenopause, we start to talk more about osteoporosis and bone health as well. And that's because of how important those sex hormones are in helping to maintain bone density.
In launching these services, UHPP is specifically trying to get the word out to women of color, transgender individuals, and gender nonconforming people. If you're trans or non-binary, I guess how might you experience menopause differently?
That is a really good question. The physical experience of menopause, I will say, is different for every individual all the time, regardless of their race, gender identity, expression. Everyone is going to have their sort of own perimenopausal, postmenopausal journey. I think that the experience still will be much different for trans and non-binary folks going through menopause because there already isn't enough information out there for cis women. And so to have the sort of lack of information in addition to the lack of representation, I just feel like the sense of being sort of lost in this sea of your body's changing, you don't know why, you don't know how, you don't know how to fix it. I think that some of those feelings of despair and feeling really lost will be more pronounced in those populations compared to maybe some others.
And so how has the outreach gone so far? What do you most want people to know about menopause?
Yeah, so we are talking to fine people like you. We're trying to, do ad campaigns and get flyers and different messages out to the communities that we know need the help the most. And so we're really trying to target our marketing to reaching those people in those groups. And the main message is just that we're here for you. The one thing that I have learned in this journey of, making sure that our clinicians felt ready to see more people for this care and make sure that they had the most up-to-date information possible as we suspect our volume to increase is just the amount of options that are out there are staggering. There are so many options. And for that reason, people can take entirely different treatment paths depending upon what they're experiencing and what is most important to them. So I think the thing that I would just love for people to know is that menopause is a totally individualized, very personal experience. And so their treatment also should be individualized for them. And so we are prepared to do that. And if they're seeing a provider that doesn't give them that much control or flexibility in their healthcare, I probably would recommend that they seek care elsewhere.
Bree Sampson is the Director of Clinical Services at Upper Hudson Planned Parenthood. She also leads its gender-affirming care program and now its menopause care program. UHPP has locations in Albany, Hudson, and Troy, New York, and you can learn more at plannedparenthood.org. Thanks for listening to this week's 51%. 51% is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio based in Albany, New York. It's produced and hosted by me, Jesse King. Our associate producer is Madeleine Reynolds, and our theme is Lolita by the Albany-based artist Girl Blue. Just a reminder that you can listen to 51% anytime at our website, WAMCpodcasts.org, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can stay in the loop on all of WAMC's shows by signing up for our weekly newsletter, Airwaves, at WAMC.org. We hope you'll join us next week. Until then, I'm Jesse King for 51%.
I was every single girl, I was nobody else, I was so sure of myself. I was 15 and a half, he was a hollow laugh. And I lost my cool somewhere along the way. The nightmare down the hallway, I had to learn how to look away. I lost my